Welcome, lads, to a new year and a new me. Well, I mean, kinda. Like, alright, listen, I know it's the same armor, but hear me out, alright? This build revolves around pure physical damage and using skills from the arena trainers and New Shiraku to destroy your enemies with ease. I do want to give credit to the wiki uploader, we're just gonna call him Worm Guy, just because his build was sort of the template I built off of, and his is more of an archer playstyle utilizing the Conjured Spirit to tank enemies while you blow them up with bow skills. However, with my build, we have the bow, which we're gonna be opening up with our 3 bow abilities: Sniper Shot, Piercing Shot, and Evasion Shot. Then we're gonna hot swap to our Big Daddy Cruiser Blade, the Masterpiece Claymore, which you can obtain by passing down the Damacian Claymore through the chest system. The reason we use this blade over others is because of the sweet passive it has. It increases our weapon skills damage output by 25%, and that is just absolutely insane. Something I would like to point out, as it says on the wiki that this includes bow and dagger skills, which is confusing because this is a claymore. So how does this work? It is just because it's in my backpack, does it increase the bow skills? Like, I don't really know what this means. So it's kind of confusing. If anyone can explain how that works, or maybe it's referring to the other weapons, just comment down below and make it clear, because I'm sort of a little confused about it. If it does work by just having the claymore in your inventory, this makes the build a lot more impressive, but if not, that's fine. It's still a good build nonetheless. Moving on to enchants, we have a few options we can pick from, but realistically it's more like one. We can put Ether Wave, which gives us elemental vulnerability, but since this is a physical build, this is rather useless outside of rags and varnishes. We also have Fulmination, which grants 5 flat lightning damage, but it's pretty meager in comparison to the other options we have, which also Mole Pig Sigh, which is ethereal damage in its stead, and it's just still not worth it. Then it comes down to these last enchants, which are Poltergeist and Whiplash. I personally would go with Whiplash, but Poltergeist does add 30% of existing physical damage as raw damage, but also reduces physical damage of the weapon by 40%. So I kind of just went with the one that doesn't require me to do math. As for breakthrough points, we have Survivor's Resilience, Steadfast Ascetic, and Shamanic Resonance, so that way we can upgrade our boons. And by upgrade, I just mean they're more effective. And just to clarify for the new players that aren't familiar with this armor set, it's the Hound Mask, the Pearlescent Mail, and for the boots, you have a few options actually, since they've updated the game and they've put in a few more boots that actually gives physical damage. For me personally, I'm using the Slayer boots, which grants us 7% physical damage increase and also gives us some bonus resistances, but you can also go with the Squire boots, which can kind of be a pain in the ass to get, or you can go with scaled leather boots, which are the easiest to get out of all 3. There's not really a wrong choice here. It's more of just what you can get your hands on at the time of your playthrough. I would like to mention that if you are a part of the Levant faction and have reached the 3 Brothers DLC, you can build the alchemy shop and unlock Kerouac's breakthrough point, which gives you 25 health and increases the physical damage you deal by 15%. This is actually a super good option with this build, and I highly recommend it. Now for this build, we're going to be opening up with bow skills, but we haven't talked about the bow yet. So we have a few options at our disposal. It's once again going to come down to what you have available during your playthrough, but for the most part, you can use the Tassar bow, you can use the I think it's Murmurs or Murray. I don't know how you pronounce, like, bro, I don't know what this means. We're just going to call it the Murmur's Bow, which you can obtain via the 3 Brothers DLC. You get the Ceremonial Bow, and then you craft it with the Pearlbird's Mask and Babada Boopy. There you go. And the Tassar Bow is through the Sauraborian's questline. It's rather simple. You just beat the questline and you're good to go. And the last option, which is probably the one that I would recommend, even though I was using the Murmurs in the playthrough, the Masterpiece Bow is really good because it's essentially the same as the Masterpiece Claymore, and it gives you the same passive where you get an increase to your weapon skills. Like I said, these are all pretty good choices and have their strengths, and whatever you choose is going to be fine, so just go with whichever one you like the most. Now it's time we reveal the reason this build is king. We have 2 abilities. One is sort of janky and the other is god tier. You can use Strafing Run with the bow, which makes you run left or right and spams 5 shots on your target, which is really good for getting big damage off, especially if you have a bow that has some sort of bleed effect or poison or just some kind of elemental buildup or whatever. It works incredibly well when it's working. This is the janky ability, unfortunately, and it's not perfect. Or you can use Moment of Truth, which bypasses 50% of the enemy's resistance, which is really great, but it also lowers your resistance by 50% for 15 seconds, which is not great, but that's only 15 seconds of vulnerability, which you can either dodge or block, just essentially play more carefully. As for which one of these abilities I prefer, it's pretty obvious. I go for Moment of Truth every single time just because, like I said, Strafing Run is really janky, and most of the time it will just miss all 5 arrows, and that's a huge waste. It wouldn't be so bad if it only happened every now and then, but it happens more often than it should. It's not great, and I don't recommend it. And just in comparison, Moment of Truth is so easy to land and does way more damage since we are using the Masterpiece Claymore. It just makes more sense to go for it. As for our buffs, we're going to be using Rage Boons and Discipline Boons. Apply these however you want, but I typically carry pots on me, so that way if I get into a fight or before I get into a fight, I'll pop the pots from my bag. If not, mid-combat, I'll either use Enrage and Focus, which I hotkey on 1 and 2. This is super important because the damage on our opening abilities are going to be increased from the bow, plus we have Shamanic Resonance, which allows us to get our boons a little bit more beefy oomph whenever we're using them. Also, we'll do a lot more damage with our Claymore. Last thing that brings this build full circle is the Brigand Backpack, which gives us a 15% increase to physical damage. But the sad part about this is that there's no lantern option, unfortunately, so we're kind of stuck in the dark whenever it is dark. But at least we hit hard as fuck, so who cares? Now, when you're opening up with your combos, you're typically just going to pop your boons, and then you're going to hit your Q, E, and then R, or Q, R, E in my situation. So Q is Sniper Shot, R is going to be our Piercing Shot, and E is Evasion Shot. So I'll do Q, R, E, and then I'll typically use Evasion Shot whenever they're running at me, so that way I can evade backwards, and then get that easy shot off, so that way it doesn't miss. And then I can switch to my Claymore, which is on 5, I believe. And then from that point, after I swap to the Claymore, I'm just fishing for an opportunity to use Moment of Truth, which will do huge amounts of damage, if not completely destroy them. One thing I do want to note about this build is that whenever you do get to the Three Brothers DLC, this sort of falls off because there's a lot of physical resistance with the enemies, so you may want to switch this up later down the line. So, i.e. switching to something that has a bit more elemental damage. I probably would use maybe something on the lines of an electric build, which I have one in the works currently, so we'll get to that later on. But for the most part, just through the early stages of the game, you'll mow everything down. You'll absolutely decimate majority of the mobs. And it's not like it's all bad in the Three Brothers. It just kind of falls off quite a bit, but like I said, we'll fix that at a later time. And the good thing about this build is that majority of these items can be obtained through the base game. You don't really need anything. The only things that are DLC are going to be the Masterpiece weapons, and obviously Murmur's Bow and anything else that's DLC items. So you can hot swap these for anything else. You can do a variety of different melee weapons as long as it's physical based. Even the Zaw, it may be slow as fuck, but it hits hard, and I think it also received a buff recently, so you can actually use that in its stead for the time being. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye bye.